I have laryngitis, so here's something. So, what is a rabbi doing here at a TEDx event? What does a rabbi have to do with technology, entertainment, or design? It might even make some of you uncomfortable to see me here, a religious figure in a rational setting. But I went to school to become a chemical engineer. I love math and science. For my thermodynamics final, I had to design a refrigerator using all the correct chemicals, reactions, and mechanisms. I got an A+. I have been known to help my bar mitzvah students with their math homework. And when people learn about my background, they often ask, how did you go from engineering to a rabbi? As if there is this huge distance between the two. And in terms of schooling, there is. But in terms of what I see at the core, I believe the two have much in common. I went into engineering because I loved our ability as humans to create, because I look at the world with a sense of wonder and awe and mystery. When I felt the call to become a rabbi, it fit because I do look at the world with a sense of wonder and awe and mystery and possibility. And so I applied for rabbinical school, a school that is 5 years postgraduate. I had to take the GRE to get in. I nailed the math section, and off I went. Rabbinical school wasn't always an easy fit for this rational scientist. One particular memory is in my 4th year when I was taking a Greyhound to visit my fiance, now husband, John, in his grad school program in Syracuse. And I was using that time on the bus to study for a liturgy final. In particular, I was studying a prayer called the Yotzer. It says, Yotzer or Uvarechosha. God is the creator of light and the creator of darkness. Oseh Shalom Uvarei Atakol, the maker of peace and the creator of awe. Now, I had always loved this prayer because it reminds us of the wonders and the beauty of creation. In fact, we call this prayer creation. But as I was there on that Greyhound bus, I was learning that this was not exactly what the prayer was all about. This prayer borrowed its text from the prophet Joshua. Joshua said these words to King Cyrus, who was at the time king over Persia and was struggling with Zoroastrian dualism. Joshua said to Cyrus that God is a Yotzer or Uvarechosha, a God of light and a God of dark, Oseh Shalom Uvorei Ra, a maker of peace and a creator of evil. See, Zoroastrians believed in a God of light and goodness and a second God of darkness and evil. So Joshua was telling him that all of these things, they come from the one source. And that made sense to me for that time period. But what didn't make sense to me was that we took this put down of another person's faith and we made this part of our daily prayers. What didn't make sense to me was here we are thousands of years later still saying this polemic against Zoroastrianism, which was a threat back then, but not so much anymore. While we as Jews are less than 0.2% of the world population, Zoroastrians are much less. Have any of you ever met a Zoroastrian? So why, I wondered, why are we still saying this prayer, which was no longer striking me as a beautiful thank you to God for creation, but it was beginning to strike me as petty crap. And so I had a little breakdown, and so did the bus. There I was on the side of the road, and I began to rethink my path. Judaism was no longer jiving with my rational mind. I had made a huge mistake. But being a rational girl, I began to think of what I could do now instead. About 45 minutes later, I had my plan in place. I was only a few months away from my master's in Hebrew literature, so I would finish out my master's, drop out of rabbinical school. I would work as a Hebrew teacher or a religious school teacher until I could find a real job using my undergraduate degree. Having made all these decisions, I had nothing left to do but look out the window. It was a beautiful sunny day. I could see particles of dust dancing on sunbeams. And in crept that familiar feeling, the feeling small and alone, and yet connected to the vastness of space. This is when I feel closest to God. So this creation prayer had left me feeling disconnected from my religion, but here was creation itself calling me back in. And so I had the urge to do something I had never done before. I prayed for a sign. Now I was very uncomfortable because I knew this was completely irrational, but I thought, what the heck? And I prayed, God, please send me a sign. Send me some sort of a sign so that I know that I should stay on this path. And right then, the bus started again. And I found myself back on the path I had been on an hour before, both to Syracuse and to rabbinical school. I aced that test as well. So I momentarily took my rational head and put it aside, and I asked for something completely irrational, and then based my career choice on something that was more likely than not a complete coincidence, which led me to the realization that I am not a completely rational human being. I think perhaps there is a new dualism in our society, that there is the rational or there is the religious, that there is science or there is faith. I think that we all are both, that we have both, and that both can enrich one another. On Friday, I had the pleasure of speaking from the Bima about a particularly nasty Torah portion, which had to do with skin disease, strange hairs, bodily discharges. In a word, it was yucky. And in this Torah portion, there is a mandate that those who are struck with these afflictions need to go and speak to the priest. They are washed in purified water. They are washed with soap. But they have to see a priest, not a medicine man. And I had to ask why. I offered this personal answer that sometimes there is a difference between being cured and being healed. A little over a year ago, I found a lump in my right breast. I was breastfeeding at the time. My mother, my sister, my bubby, they had all had lumps in their breast and they had all been benign. I wasn't worried. I was only 32. So, being a rational person, I still went to the doctor. And while he thought it also was probably just milk, I insisted on getting a biopsy, a ultrasound, a mammogram, and I went through the entire process as if it were a study. For me as a rabbi to understand what my congregants go through when they get diagnosed with breast cancer. They, not me, because I was going to be fine. So, a lot of it struck me as amusing. I was amused when the doctor sang as she did the biopsy. I was amused when they put on me what can only be described as a zebra-striped titty tassel. And I was amused when the tech thought that I had breast implants because I was quite flat-chested. When the doctor, who had purple streaks in her hair and purple fingernails, called me into her office, I thought nothing of it. But then she told me I had breast cancer. The report was placed. I began chemotherapy. A plan was made. Chemo followed by surgery, followed by radiation. I cut off and donated what was at the time my very long, very feminine hair. And I kept working. And I kept being a mom. And I kept being a wife. And I kept being a friend. And I kept being a daughter. And I also kept waiting. I was waiting and waiting for the meaning of this illness to show itself. I thought when I was diagnosed that I would get upset, and then a few weeks or months later, I would begin to appreciate the little things in life more, as so many women who I know who have gone through this before do. That simply wasn't happening. I was already an appreciative person. The little things were not suddenly more rosy and glowing. My relationships were not becoming richer. In fact, the only thing that was changing was the amount of time I spent in the doctor's office and in the bathroom. So I asked myself, how can this illness enable me to grow? What meaning can I make of this? And I began to read cancer book after cancer book after cancer book. Perhaps this was the meaning of my illness. I was supposed to use my position as rabbi to speak from the bima about the terrible chemicals and hormones that we put in our food, that we spread on our body unaware, the things that we allow into our house that are poisoning us. Yes, I would use my position as a rabbi to change the way we consume in our culture and change the world. And if I'd done that, it would have been a great TED Talk. But I didn't do that because I still needed to be healed. My tumor, which was anywhere from between 4.5 to 8.5 centimeters, shrunk to nothing just from the chemotherapy. I had a bilateral mastectomy, replacing my breast with implants, so there's nothing for the cancer to come back to. I had radiation just in case there was a few cells left behind. I had been to the doctor. I knew I was close to being cured, but I still wasn't healed. I had been to the doctor, but what I needed was a rabbi. That prayer, the Yotzer, the creation prayer, it was haunting me. I needed to be fully myself. If we say this prayer on a daily basis, where we call God the maker of light and the maker of dark, the maker of peace, and yes, even the source of evil, and I teach that we are supposed to love God, then perhaps I could begin to love myself in all of my complexity. I needed to nurture every part of myself to be healed. And I know that things like that are said all of the time. And it wasn't as if I wasn't living a genuine life. I was. But I wasn't allowing those parts of myself that are uniquely for me and not for everybody else to be nurtured. See, we as rabbis, we are the kind of people who want everyone to like us. And so we tend to only show those parts of ourselves that are for everyone else. And I needed complete healing to deal with those other places. And so I found my healing, yes, in being a wife and a mother and a daughter and a sister and a friend. And yes, in being a rabbi, I do love my job. And yes, through prayer and spirituality. But I also found my healing through yoga and through a hip-hop dance class and through creating a fundraiser with the help of some friends to raise money for women who were going through this process, who were not blessed to have the best doctors in Miami as their congregants. I found my healing through allowing myself to be weak with my family and my friends and my congregation, and even with myself. So, that Yotzer prayer, which almost changed my life all those years ago on the Greyhound bus, because it struck me as petty crap, stuck with me. The idea that good and bad, light and dark, all come from the same source, they comfort me. Because even when we are in lightness, to know that we are more complex than all that sunshine. To know that when we are in darkness, that there is always light to be found. That healed me. I was medically as close to being cured as I could be when I got my lab results, but I wasn't healed until my spirit was nourished. People say that belief in God or a higher power is a leap of faith. But have you ever felt it? Have you ever felt small and alone and yet connected to the vastness of space? Have you ever had a connection with someone that went beyond words? Have you ever marveled at a flower's ability to undergo photosynthesis and just sat in awe and wonder at the mystery of creation? Have you ever needed more than just the rational? I believe that perhaps there is no dualism. Perhaps we are all connected. And perhaps when we come to pivotal moments in our lives, we may need someone or something, someone outside of ourselves, even if it's completely irrational, to heal us, to send us back on our path.